to another episode of the Wrist Cheese Radio podcast, your home for horological hot takes, taboo topics, and often unpopular watch opinions. I'm your host, Brodinky. With me, as always, is my friend Schmidt. Schmitty, how are we doing this week?
I'm doing well, my buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm well rested. The family took a little trip up to Massachusetts.
Okay.
So I'm feeling pretty good. If you go back two episodes, you can actually hear me botch the intro, and I go for I don't know if I went for as me with as with me as always or as always with me, but I said it in a jumbly mess that I when I listened back, I just left it in because I thought it was funny. But I
Hey,
was quite yeah, I was in a bit of a stupor, but I had a few days of decent sleep, and I am ripping and ready to go here this evening.
that's awesome, man. Yeah, likewise. It's been a fun week. It's getting a little colder here where I live. Things are starting to feel more like the end of the year season wise. So it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play out for us long term. But everyone's in good spirits. Everyone's doing good. So excited to be back.
For sure. Before we get into it, I don't have a ton of housekeeping, more just some things to keep an eye out for. I know I mentioned it previously on the pod that I was getting a little feature in the Watch Annual that is now coming out. They're taking orders for that. So myself and a bunch of other contributors, I think 100 and some odd total, all kicked in. And it's a pretty cool little publication. I know part of the sale goes to charity, so that's always good. Check
Okay.
that out if you so desire. And I also got a little section in the Watches of Espionage newsletter. If any of you follow that or into his whole shtick, he actually contacted me to make a meme to actually make fun of him, which was funny. So he's a good sport,
The
but
greatest troll.
yeah, I threw a bunch together, and I was like, yeah, you just pick whatever one floats your boat. So you put one of them in, and then the rest he kind of threw up in his story and was like, these were the ones that were in contention. So that was kind of neat. We had a good laugh about that.
That's funny.
Yeah, fun to see that former I want to say he's a CIA operative, but whatever he is,
Yeah, I think it's CIA. Yeah, he's
somebody
former
who's
CIA.
who's been in that kind of situation can have a good sense of humor is a very very relieving thing.
Oh yeah, for sure,
Refreshing.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Some new stuff and nothing overly popular. This is some very niche stuff here, but some neat things that kind of caught my eye throughout the week that we were talking about before the show. I know you sent this one to me. This one really jumps at you if you happen to see this one. It is the Raymond Weil Freelancer. It's labeled a GMT, but I think it's a world timer, no?
Yeah, so it's gotten like a GMT indication, like in a
Right.
normal sense, but it does have, I believe, with the secondary rotating crown, it does feature a
Yeah.
world timer
Yep.
scale. But I think primarily movement wise, it's going to be just a straight up GMT that
Okay.
you can rotate the track, that you can rotate the internal bezel to track an alternate time zone. But it's a great looking watch. I really like it.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is not a brand I frequent,
No, not at all.
but in passing, I, I
Not at all.
definitely I definitely stopped and came back to this one. There's a lot going on. If you're a fan of busy dials or busy watches, Navitimers, things like that, this one might be for you. There's some very interesting textures. There's a lot of concentric circles in that, a lot of scales. Obviously, we
It
talked about a bunch of cities. There's GMT, and I don't know if you
Yeah,
noticed this at the 24 hour on the GMT, it's a little moon instead of the 24.
that's right.
Kind of
Yes, it
neat,
is.
little crescent moon.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that touch on a watch like that before, but it makes total sense. I mean, it is technically midnight.
Yeah, very cute, very cute. 6 o'clock date kind of weaved in there, but nicely. It's not too obtrusive at all.
But for me, this watch is even as busy as it is. The one thing I really do like about it is it's laid out in a format that is very readable. It's
Extremely.
extremely legible. There's a lot of depth here without being overly thick on the watch. I think you were telling me what the size measurements are, just over 9 millimeters.
9.7 thick on a watch
That's
with this
crazy.
much stuff in it is
That's
pretty
crazy.
nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it looks like it wears really well. The case size is 40.5 millimeters. It looks like the two auxiliary crowns and the bezel itself are made out of bronze.
Yes.
So you'll get some patina action there. There's a lot of different cool colorways that they're doing. There's a darker green kind of gradiated dial for the 24-hour scale, signifying that day night. You have different types of olive drab green. The use of colors is very, very good here. The use of contrast, the use of textures, as you mentioned, those concentric circles. There's a lot of visual play that makes this dial busy, but the way that they did it allows it to be extremely legible, very succinct. I can see all the information at a very quick glance, and I'm not having to really try to
No,
read the watch.
what I personally like about this, and I think it kind of lends to the legibility, is if you look at each one of the hands, they hit exactly where they should be
Yeah,
perfectly. Now, I don't know if that's going to translate into QC and all that good stuff,
yeah,
but if you look, the hour hand hits those thick hour markers
yep,
perfectly.
yep,
The
yep,
minute hand touches the GMT ring just barely, but it gets all the way over the minute markers. The
yeah.
GMT hand hits the number just barely, and then the I can't tell if that's a lollipop or as we like to call it, the old martini olive second hand.
Yeah, I
But
think it's a
the
martini olive second hand for sure.
so that martini olive is right on that very center ring, and everything lines up so beautifully. And I would love to see this kind of loomed up, charged with a UV light. I think it would really sing. But
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I like even the strap is a nice shade of that olive drab, and to see this all to come together with all these different shades of kind of muted green, I think would be a really really cool thing to check out.
Yeah, and one thing I do like about this as well is the way that everything works together in terms of the color. It's a very like, although I wouldn't normally classify this as a field watch,
Right.
like this feels very utilitarian, very like duty purpose driven for me. It feels like a field watch.
I could see that.
Although it's completely not that. It feels like it's an adventurous timepiece, which I think is kind of the motif here. You get the GMT complication because you're traveling. You can track alternate time zone codes with the world timer scaling on the outside. It's an automatic watch. It's a great looking piece, great package. I think this is a very cool watch for Raymond Wiles. So it'll be very cool to see on the wrist.
They're not cheap at 27 hundo, but I
Not
think I
not
think the
expensive either.
no, not for not for this hobby. But I think you're right. I think the bronze gives it that safari look.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it. I think it's very
Yeah.
good looking.
You sent it to me and I passed it on my own, and I had to scroll back up because I was like, hold on a sec. Like I thought it was something, I don't know what I thought it was something Breitling, something that's usually pretty
Right?
busy. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I thought it was an olive drab Nabatimer or something.
Which, would not be a bad
Nope.
an OD green Navitimer would not actually be a
No,
bad color
that would
choice.
be pretty sick. Next up is the Edox, another brand I have zero experience with, but the Edox Neptunian. This one caught me because I always talk about how obviously I have affections for the Pelagos, and recently I've been looking at the Citizen, the blue titanium diver, and just sort of this very clean blue diver look with heavy blue and white contrast really speaks to me.
Yeah.
And so this one caught my eye. It's 1,000 meter diver. It's got a helium escape valve. It is a little big though, at 44 millimeters.
Yeah,
Now,
it looks big.
44 in divers can mean a bunch of things. I know the Turtle is 44, the Willards are 44, 45, and those wear fine. Seiko has kind of a bit of case and lug magic in that way that they make things very wearable in that size. Not
Yeah.
everybody can do that.
Yeah. This looks like a little bit of like a fatter Submariner. I mean, it's obviously going to have a little bit more sizable presence. It's got pretty prominent crown guards there on the side, a pretty thick bezel, some normal chamfering on the case and everything like that. It looks like a little bit of a classic, 50 style diver, but it is obviously a little bit bigger. But it is still 1,000 meter rated dive watch. So there's going to be inherently some more space that's needed to make that happen.
Yep.
Just the way that it's designed. But it's not like an ugly watch. It's not like an unwearable watch like the watch we talked about last week. But certainly a watch for somebody who's probably got a larger stature, a bigger wrist, and could pull off something like that. But the color's great. The color is really, really pretty. It's you described it to me as like the Tudor Pelagos blue.
Yeah, it's
And
almost
I
like Caribbean
yeah,
style. Yeah.
It's so good. It's one of my favorite colors in the watch industry. It's not used enough. It's like a very royal, like man, it's like a Dodgers like Cubs blue,
So it's
It's just
almost like
like
a vibe. It's not even, I don't even want to call it a navy. It's not navy.
no, it's not navy.
It's more vibrant than a navy, but it's not quite cobalt.
I think it's
It,
like a royal blue is kind of the color. Because
it might be.
if you Google royal blue, it has some purple undertones to it,
It might be.
which I think is kind of what we're getting at here. It's a very prominent, vibrant color, and I like that because so many people default to the light blue, and so many people default to the navy blue because navy's easy.
It's
That dark blue is great.
it's funny you said that because now I'm looking over and I happen to have when Nomo sent over the deep pink for me to check out, they gave me a little fountain pen with it,
Oh
and
yeah,
it came with some cartridges. And I looked at the packaging for the cartridges that is in a blue that is spot on to what we're talking about, and it says royal blue. So there
yeah,
you go.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like it's got some purple tones in it,
Yeah,
some violet tones in there. So that's kind of the differentiating factor. But a great looking color. Not a watch for me per se. Even though I am a diver, there's some other versions in this line. I think the technical line is a Skydiver Neptunian. There's some other versions that I would probably choose before this one, but I think the color's really great.
it is, and 1450, not bad. Right.
No,
Again,
no,
we're
no,
saying
not
that's
bad.
not an expensive watch, especially for a 1,000 meter diver. I know you're getting a generic SW200, but nothing wrong with that, really, especially in this price range. I think you're okay there. But if you're somebody, maybe you're into the whole ultra deep aesthetic and the over engineered watch, and you're not trying to break the bank, maybe this one's up your alley.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, I shouldn't say a prominent brand. It was once a prominent brand.
Right.
This is
Right.
one of those brands that kind of suffered through the quartz crisis, and it was kind of one of those things that kind of got resurrected. It went through some rebranding and kind of came back. And they're starting to kind of enter maybe just above the micro space because I mean they are technically a brand that had a previous
Yeah.
history.
Going back to last week yet again, where we were talking about the heritage revival versus micro versus everything
Exactly.
else.
Everything
Yeah.
comes full circle at some point.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Uh, this next one you sent me, this one's way off the reservation, something that I'm completely unfamiliar with. It's a brand called ZRC. Here's your reference: GF 38 26 3. This is a very, very interesting watch, and it's going to be unlike most things that you've ever seen. I can't remember the name of the watch. Somebody else made something similar to it not that long ago that had a crown, I think at 12. This has a crown at 6, I believe.
Yeah.
I can't remember what that watch was called. But anyway, at any rate, this is it's very out there. It's a 39 millimeter diver. It's got some cool features like a roulette date wheel. It's got that Martini Olive second hand,
Yeah.
and it's just out there. It's got a weird bracelet, very funky. I don't know what you call it. It looks like a razor bracelet without the cutouts, so it wouldn't make it a razor bracelet. But
Yeah, it's like a hybrid between like a ladder style bracelet and a razor bracelet. And it's like self-adjusting. Like you can like unclip the links yourself
yeah,
to size it at home, which is very interesting. But the ZRC, I mean, this is a very oddball watch design. I don't know too many brands that have covered them or too many podcasts that have talked about them before. But it was an older established brand that was very popular in the 1960s, 1970s as a dive watch company. They did actually supply watches to the French Navy because they used everybody. But they did supply watches to the French Navy, so they have some military diving history there. But a very atypical style of dive watch. But
yes,
obviously, every single element of the watch was designed for diving in mind. You have these extremely large rectilinear paddle hands. You have the Martini Olive second hand, which is fantastic. You have a crown that's oriented at 6 o'clock, so it makes it easy to wind and set without obstructing the wrist movement in any way. You have a very interesting bezel design, luminous markers and hands. It's a very distinctive dive watch. but 100% you know it is a Time watch.
Yeah.
There's no mistaking it for anything like that. And I think overall the design is funky as it is. You know how I feel about funky divers. I mean, I did track down a Ploprof.
Nope.
I'm for it. I think it's fantastic. So they just released this in the 39, which I think is a great size for this watch because I think they were previously larger at like 42, 43, somewhere around there. But very, very cool watches.
Yeah, not cheap, around 32 hundo in Swiss francs. But if this is your jam, this is your jam. Like this is out there. It's very esoteric. It's
Very
very
unique.
niche. But if you're one of those people who likes kind of the wild look, if maybe you're a Proflof person or something like that, maybe this is for you. Or maybe you're one of those people who's very into the steampunk motif or something, and you could throw this on some
Yeah.
weird leather situation.
I mean,
Like the if you like the PO1, I feel like this you're all over this.
yeah, but you know what? At least this watch is functional. The
No,
PO1
yeah,
is just not functional at all.
yeah,
The
yeah.
articulating lugs to unlock the, yeah, it's just not a thing. This one you can at least still use as an actual watch daily, and it doesn't look like a ridiculous statement.
Yeah, this is almost overly purpose built.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is the same thing with the Ploprof, right? Like it has its unique purpose for a reason. And it was designed to satiate a need. You know, it was designed specifically for a purpose, and that's evident here. But I love the design. I think it's very cool. There's nothing else out there that I know that's like it, unless those other brands are riffing on this design. You know, but very, very cool. I love the ZRC.
And lastly, to round out the watches from brands I've never heard or never played around with, I'm going to call this Batavi. I don't know if that's how you pronounce this brand, but they have a watch out. And this watch, I passed it. Somebody was reviewing it. I had to go back. The color scheme on it is amazing. So I checked it out. It's called the Geograph with two A's and an F World Timer. And it's got a funny name. It's a limited edition. We're gonna we're gonna go with Pamukkale. I don't know, but it's named after
Yeah, I think it's Pamukkale.
a hot spring in Turkey.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's got a fancy schmancy name, but that's where it comes from. Great size, 39 mils, 13 thick, 200 meters in a world timer, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
Really cool H-link bracelet. They also have it on a strap. Looks pretty good, but uh, it's got you called it a watermelon look. I think that's a pretty accurate description. It's that bluish green dial, and the inner ring scale is pinkish, and the contrast is amazing. I like it a lot. It looks really good.
And
Uh,
all of their dial colors are like that. I mean, they had a similar type of watch like in a like a deep royal purple, and they do a lot of stuff with colors. And I know you and I were talking about this off air. To us, this looks like kind of a mix in the same vein as like Fairer.
yeah, that's what I thought it was when I
I mean,
passed it.
that's what you were pointing out, and to me, I think that that's also true. But I would mix in a little bit of Zodiac,
Yeah, I can see that.
and it's kind of those two colors, those two companies that are so in tune with color and the usage of it. That I think this is kind of where that watch is blending both of those design concepts together, and it's obviously something that's kind of its own thing, especially in the color choice that it's using. Because it's not quite the Zodiac watermelony colors. It's a little bit different than
A
that.
little minty.
Yeah, it's a little bit more the minty, like seafoam color,
Yep.
but really good looking watch. And I think, despite how they use color, I think it's attractive. It's wearable. It's daily. Certainly a conversation piece, and I think it would be cool to see one.
Yeah, markers look really cool. I'm always a fan of syringe hands. And now that I'm looking closer at this, I'm noticing the 24 on this inner scale
It's
also has a
also a
moon.
moon. Oh wow, yeah, yeah. I just
But
saw that.
they did a sun at the 12,
They
which is awesome.
did.
And then you have
Huh.
basically it looks like a darker and a lighter shade of pink for the day and night hours. But
Gotcha.
yeah, overall kind of neat. And I guess you'd mix in what was the company that did this color? What was it? It was a micro brand, not Astor and Banks. I think they did one, but somebody did this one and it was a big hit. It'll come to me, but it was a micro brand, and they dropped
This pink color?
no this mint color, and it was a big
Oh,
hit.
was it Traska?
That was it, the Traska. I think it was the
Traska.
Summit tier. I want to say it was,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
they
That's
put it
right.
out in this color, and everybody lost their mind. So if you missed
It's
out
a
on
cool
that
color.
one, you better if you want this, you better hop on it because I think it's a 75 piece limited edition, not badly priced, 789 doll hairs. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And for those of you that are gonna ask us, it's Batavi or Batavi, and it's Batavi. They're
yep,
based in Amsterdam. And this is the Geograph, Geograaf.
indeed. So in scrolling watches recently, I was checking out new stuff for the show, and I came across obviously both of us we have a Casio already, so I don't really pay attention to many of the newer ones that come out. One that came out in September I passed by happened to be a full metal black Casio,
Yeah.
which I am a fan of in the sense that I don't love the faux precious metal Casios. I've said before I don't really
Yeah.
like the way they look. The silver's okay. I guess this is them kind of taking the market share back from all the modders that went hard in the paint,
Oh,
trying
for
to make it
sure.
look Royal Oaky and stuff like that. But so now you can get them in full metal, I think, as of September. And the one that I'm specifically referencing is the GMB 2100. I think it looks pretty cool. I don't know how it's gonna wear. Again, Casios are a little weird. I find that they either fit like a dream or they don't fit your wrist comfortably at all, whether they're resin or whatever.
Yeah.
And those are not necessarily small watches. I think they're 44 millimeter themselves,
Let me double check. Let's see
if
here.
I'm not mistaken, even though they do wear pretty decently, and they're obviously pretty light. But
So according to this one, and I don't know if it's the same for the resin Casio, it says 49.8 by 44.4 and
okay,
12.8. So
okay.
width is 44.4, so you're about right, 45, and then lug to lug is 49.
But so anyway, I was like, well, that's cool because if you're not a plastic watch person, maybe you want something a little stealthy, but also kind of metal, right? Maybe you don't want to wear it. Maybe you're not trying to rock plastic. I don't know, going out to dinner or going out for the night or something like that. But I kind of took a mental inventory a little bit of what's going on. And I don't know if it's because I've just been noticing it more or if it's trending now, but I feel like black watches are sort of having a bit of a moment again. They've been around and we've had them.
Yeah, for
Obviously,
sure.
Tudor's put out a bunch of Black Bay variants in black. You have the things like the uh, Breitling Blackbirds and stuff like that. Like they've been around, and there was definitely a period where black watches were hot. But I feel like they're having a bit of a renaissance at the moment. Almost. I mean, just from noticing what's been coming out recently in new releases we talked about. I know Seiko did that night series where they have
Yep.
the darker steel with the sort of glowing loom. They also put out an anniversary edition of a few watches. There was like a Willard and the watch that looks like the 62 Mas where it's black coated and it's got orange and white accents that have been really cool.
Yeah, and we saw Doxa launch the Doxa Sub 300 ceramic.
Right,
I'm
with
sorry, not Sub
the
300, but the
carbons, right?
no, not the carbons, but the ceramic one that was in the army, because
Oh
they
yes,
did that
yes, yes,
limited
yes.
edition launch with analog shift and Watches of Switzerland, and those first, I think it was like 100 pieces or something like that, or something. I can't remember, but they were all black ceramic. It was the first ceramic Doxa, and those were black, right? That was just earlier this year, and then they followed that up with the production versions, right?
Right. And so we recently we had an Orient that they did in black. We've seen there's Panerais coming out in black. Doxa put out that they put out the carbons.
Mm-hmm.
Zinn's been doing it for a minute, but they put out some new ones. And G-Shock, as I just mentioned, I don't know. I'm finding myself drawn to them now. I know I've mentioned them a few times on the pod recently, but I feel like they're kind of coming back. And I remember I really got hooked by black watches when somebody put up a picture of it was, I think it went to auction. I think it was Karl Lagerfeld's Royal Oak, and it was black, and
Oh yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
worn to high hell. Like it was the black was clearly rubbing off, but it looked really, really good.
Yeah,
Uh,
it had been aggressively patinaed.
yes, but it looked really cool, and I was like, damn, that actually looks pretty damn good. And then recently, I mentioned it before, watches espionage. He puts up every once in a while. It's a Breitling. I know there's an aerospace, but there's also it's either the Aviator 8 or the Navitimer 8, and it's got an Arab dial and it's
Yeah,
coated, and it just
yeah.
looks so awesome. It's a day and date, looks really good, and I'm just like, oh, these. I don't know if it's coming back or if my tastes are just adjusting and changing as everybody's do. But I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm here for the black watches. And so with Black Friday approaching, it seemed like a good idea for an episode topic.
Back in black, right?
That's right. Well, now that you've given away my episode title that I had canned.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a pretty
Well, if
normal
they're
one,
listening,
right?
they've seen it already, so it's fine.
Right, exactly,
But
exactly.
sometimes
So
I have them ready to go. Sometimes I think of them on the spot. But
yeah, exactly. So you're right about the Karl Lagerfeld. It was a groundbreaking $1 million watch. It was a blacked out AP Royal Oak,
it looked so good because
and it was
you
PVD.
PVD coated, and we're going to talk about a little bit about some different coating options and exactly what that is. So PVD, I guess let's start there, right? Physical vapor deposition.
Deposition. Yep, that's right. So are you familiar with this process?
So from what I understand, they're basically taking the outer layer of the watch is going to be vaporized, and then, as it sounds, redeposited on the watch with a coating, more or less.
Yeah, basically, from how I understand it, when it was explained to me, is you take so there's what there's how many states of matter? There's three states, right? There's like solid, liquid, gas,
Not
right?
like a gas. Some people will split a hair and say plasma, but
Okay, right. So technically, depending on who you're talking to,
yeah.
for. But what happens is physical vapor deposition happens in a vacuum chamber, and essentially what they're doing is they're taking a solid, bypassing the liquid state, and creating it straight into a gas.
We call that sublimation.
Okay, all right. For those of you who don't know, bro has a chemistry background, so
I
this is
dabble in
he's
science.
he's not pulling this stuff out of his butt. But
Nope.
so you bypass a liquid stage, and basically you create this pigmentation or whatever it is into a vapor, and that vapor is deposited directly over the substrate, which would in this case would be a steel case, a bracelet, a dial, whatever you want to coat in that vacuum environment. Okay, it literally just like attracts to the material.
I guess that's where the vacuum comes in,
Correct. Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So PVD has been around forever. You can use it a lot, and they do certainly do that a lot in the watch industry, especially at lower price points for watches, because it's a great coating material, but it is somewhat limited in its technology. It will wear off at some point.
Right. And I think in my own research, it was noted that DLC is a little more resilient than PVD.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the biggest contrast before we get into DLC,
Okay.
the biggest thing with PVD is you're able to achieve a wide range of color spectrum. That is the biggest thing. With DLC, before we get into how it's actually done, DLC coatings only allow you to do stuff on a certain color of grayscale to black scale. So you can't do blue DLC.
Right.
You can do a dark gray DLC, an anthracite, a black, an off color, whatever, but it's somewhere in that vein.
Right. PVD, you can do gold, rose. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can do whatever you want. It could be green, it could be blue. I mean, because you have to remember when we talk about PVD usages in watches, a lot of times when we're referring to coating specifically for black,
Yes.
it's the external coating on a case or a bracelet, right? Or things like a crown, bezel, pushers, that kind of stuff. But PVD is used by all major brands in the watch industry for dial treatments, for treatments on hands, for markers, things like that. Logos. All of those things can be created in PVD. And as you mentioned, you can PVD in 18 karat gold. You can do rose gold. You can do whatever you want. as long as you have that material to do so. Now, is it impossible? Is it possible to create every color on the spectrum? No, there are some limitations based on the color spectrum which you can create in PVD. But for the vast majority of brands, they're going to be able to create a red dial, a lime green dial, whatever they want in that colorway using PVD technology. So, although we're talking about this as it applies to the external components of the watch, it's also important to understand that's one of the biggest differences between PVD and DLC is that you can use it to do more things.
And from what I understand, PVD you can also achieve different, a little more different texture wise.
Potentially, yes.
Whereas DLC you're getting mostly a matte finish.
I
You're getting it's more of a blasted coating.
maybe I'm not entirely sure that I didn't notice, but where PVD can also change is the finishing of the base material first.
Okay.
So if you sandblast your case and then you PVD over it, it's going to be a sandblasted finish
Okay.
because the substrate itself has been altered to a certain finishing level that will allow that pigmentation to adhere to it in that same finish.
That makes sense.
So if you do a polished bevel on a case, it's going to still mirror that polished bevel with the PVD treatment. The same thing is true with the brush finish as well.
So would that be how a brand like Seiko does the Diashock coating or whatever it's called? I think it's not Diashock.
Yeah,
What is
or
it?
Diashield.
Diashield. That's it. Sorry. Diashield coating where it's like it has a like a clear coat basically that prevents scratching.
Yeah, it's like a hardener on top of the material, right? Or some type of like
Yeah,
to
I
use a
didn't look
funny
that up. That
to,
just came to
to
me.
use a
So
to use a funny term, a liquid skin. God, the liquid skin. But yes, I mean, I would imagine. I don't know. I'm not going to say that I know
right.
100%, but I would imagine it's got to be some type of topical coating that they're applying to the outside surface of the watch. But that's the other thing too to understand. And the reason why this can be done is when you think about things like hands or a dial, you can do a sun brushing finish on a
Yeah.
dial, and then you PVD it, and it carries the sun brushing finish through, right? You can do engraving elements on those dials, and no matter what, you can carry that through in whatever color you decide to use.
Hmm.
So PVD is very versatile for so many different things. The only limitation with is PVD is very difficult to actually coat something if it's multi-dimensional.
Okay.
So if it's something that's relatively flat, a link, a bezel, those are all things that are relatively flat. Um,
I
I
would
can coat
imagine
them pretty
a
easily.
I would imagine like a heavy, intricate knurling on a crown would be a pain in the neck.
Absolutely. Because PVD is really supposed to be only done in one dimension. I can
Okay.
coat something in one dimension. So let's say I have a full watch and I wanted to coat the top surface, the sides, and the bottom, theoretically. If I did that, that could require three PVD treatments
Huh.
because technically I can only do, if it's coating in one dimension, I can only coat the top surface. If I wanted to do the sides or the bottom, that potentially could require two additional treatments to achieve that desired effect. So PVD can be a little bit more costly in the sense from the manufacturing standpoint. It's like, hey, we had to do more applications of this. It requires more time. So there's more money in that, investment. There's also more material that you have to utilize. But in addition to that, there's also more potential to damage something or to screw something up if the coating doesn't adhere properly in the same way on an additional treatment. So that's why you'll see a lot of times, like I have a Tissot manual wind watch. The hands on the top are PVD, but the dial is white. So when you have the hands, you can see a little reflection of gold, which is like the brass material
Yeah.
underneath on the dial because they didn't PVD the bottom of the hands.
Oh,
Okay. So if you ever notice that on your watch, it's because it's a PVD'd hand and they only did the top surface.
interesting.
And that's just cost cutting. That's why, a Tissot can be $1,500 versus, something like a Omega or something else, $5,000-$6,000. There's extra levels of care and detail that go into something like that make the cost more.
Wow. So from there, I guess we'll go to the other popular choice among the elevated watches, let's just call them. DLC diamond like coating. First of all, I have a slight gripe that diamond like is hyphenated and it's getting three-letter abbreviation. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm a little I'm
So
a little in
it's
between.
kind of crazy because it's actually diamond like carbon coating.
Oh,
So it
well,
really should
see,
be DLCC, but nobody calls it that.
yeah,
Everyone
well,
calls it DLC coating.
now I got beef. So,
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of a misnomer, but it's diamond like carbon coating. A lot of people forget the carbon in there, but basically you're creating something that mimics the structural integrity of carbon that's utilized, in the same way that like how diamonds are
well,
formed.
that's what diamonds are pressurized carbon, and that's
Correct.
what you're getting is pressurized carbon coating.
Correct. So it's basically coating something in a slick surface in a way that makes it resistant to impact and scratching. Right.
And
And
they
now one
achieve this by blasting carbon, I guess at a extremely high speed and creating pressure is what it seems like from what I understand.
Yeah, and it's a much more labor intensive version of coding, but when you do a DLC coding, it's more expensive, but it's also a much stronger coding. Now, the only thing I don't know about, and just because I frankly haven't looked into it, I don't know if you're able to achieve different finishes in DLC. Now, I would imagine that you should be able to, but when I Google a lot of things that are DLC coded, typically they have a shine to them. They have a sheen, almost like a glossy texture to them. Now, I don't know if that's because just what I'm looking at, or if it's one of those things that's it's a watch would be different. I'm not sure, but it's a very hard coating. It's very scratch resistant. But like I said, the biggest problem with DLC is you can only do stuff in the black color spectrum um, way because it's carbon, right? You can't do green carbon.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have things that are going to be dark gray, gunmetal, anthracite, those type of colorways. Whereas PVD, you can do more things. I mean, technically, you could PVD a watch in blue on the outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really do that with carbon coatings. So it's an interesting coating. More higher end brands will use DLC as opposed to PVD. So things that I would say probably your sub $2,000 brands, those are probably going to use a PVD coating. Something like a Tudor, Longines, things like that, they're probably going to use the more expensive coating, which is a little bit better, which is going to be DLC.
Yeah. And then where do carbon case watches fall in? Is that's something entirely different?
Yes, it's something entirely different because it's not a coating; it's a actual composite material. So carbon itself would be something similar to like carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber. Okay.
So when you look at these watches, you look at Panerai, you look at Doxa, their new carbon series. Christopher Ward has a carbon series. There's so many brands that do this, even all the way up to Richard Mille, right, with their carbon watches. Basically, they're taking different types of synthetic materials, predominantly carbon, and they're compacting it together into a case and pressing it into something. And then from there, they'll machine it and they'll cut it to define the geometry or whatever they're making. But it is essentially a composite material. Now, the thing is it's ultra light. It's very unique in how it's created because the cases themselves have different striations and different things because of how they created the patterning for the composite material. But the biggest downside to it is composite. It can scratch,
Yep.
it can chip, it can crack. And when it does that, it is completely fail. It's a complete failure of the case. Like, this is always funny when I talk to people about this. Like, if you had an RM, right, and let's say it was something carbon case like a Johann Blake carbon case RM, that's an amazing watch. It's a technological marvel. If you dent it, how do you fix the case? You don't. You have to completely replace it. I don't know about you, but I don't want to look up the price for an RM case replacement.
Nope.
Being as that one is probably $500,000 itself.
Yeah. It's
So
a house.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, $10,000, $20,000 for a case, that would be insane. So it's cool from a novelty factor that this is an ultra lightweight watch. Bright Light is in that same vein. Like those are composite carbon cases. It's essentially a different variation of something like a carbon fiber, right? They're just taking different sheets of the carbon material to create it. But it is something that can be scratched and dented and damaged. And if it does happen, it's probably a little bit more expensive to replace it. Although that said, that carbon Doxa white pearl, baby,
Hmm.
that baby girl's calling my
It's
name,
nice. It is nice.
especially with that full lume dial.
Yeah, I got my hands on one finally. It was nice.
Yeah,
And with that, I think um, those being kind of the two main coatings, we talked about carbon as something alternative. And then from what I understand, most of the rest of the cheaper coatings are done by electrolysis,
yeah,
which
like
is
an electroplating.
ion plating, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
if anybody's familiar with chemistry, again, it's redox reaction, it's ions moving back and forth with electric current, blah blah blah. It goes from one metal to the other. It's plating is what it is exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah,
your cheaper watches are going to have that. That's very cost effective. That's why like costume jewelry and things like that will
yeah.
use
You
electrolysis.
can mimic a desired effect without the additional cost,
Yeah.
both of the raw materials and of the actual process itself. And you can do many different cases or bracelets at the same time. And that's the other thing too.
Oh
I don't
yes.
know I don't know how many things you can PVD at the same time. I imagine even if it was, say, something like a batch of 5 or 10 cases in a vacuum chamber, that's probably a much smaller output than something like electrolysis plating or electroplating, where you could do a batch of like 200, right?
Yeah, they just have to be immersed in whatever the.
Yeah, and if you're getting this from a supplier that's able to do this on a massive scale, or you do it internally as a factory, you could do hundreds at a time.
Yeah, I can't imagine vacuum chambers are huge.
No, I can't
Doesn't make
imagine that
sense.
they
Doesn't
are.
make sense
I
to me.
can't imagine that they are. So that's my point. It's like there's different aspects of the complexity of the manufacturing that make this a little bit more cost prohibitive for the process.
And with that, I think you and I both have some black watches that we either enjoy, have our eye on, or otherwise. Between the two of us, I actually picked ones that I have experience with. So going
Did you really?
complete 180 from our opening, where I have no idea where any of those watches came from.
I mean,
Um,
this is one of those few episodes where we're kind of like, okay, so we're talking about this. Like, do you know about this watch? Like, not really. Do you know about this
all
watch?
you know
Not
is
really.
throughout the week we just send each other stuff, and then Friday or Saturday rolls around, and I'm like, all right, well, let me do a little digging, get some notes
We find out what we're
together,
gonna talk about
and
on
I'm like,
on
I
on
don't know
Sunday
any of
night.
these.
Yeah, I know. And that's kind of the funny thing about the industry too, is there's so many micro brands that are just popping out of everywhere, and in all these different spaces, and it's a great thing. More options for the industry is better, but it's just like sometimes it's very hard to stay on top of everything that comes out because there's just so much stuff.
Yeah, these aren't like crypto shit coins or anything that just pop up and disappear. Like these are this is a good thing to have varieties. This is
Absolutely, absolutely.
but with that, I guess I'll start with the cheapest option here for in case anybody has lost their shirt in the market recently. Uh,
Mm.
so the I have this guy. I actually have it in my hand right here. It's the Timex Expedition North Post Solar. It's a. It says that it is a sandblasted watch, which I assume means it's. Actually, I don't know. Does that mean it's DLC, or do you think it's sandblasted PVD coating? Because I would think it
It,
was
so
probably
it's
PVD.
Yeah, it's probably going to be PVD,
Yeah,
especially given the cost of the watch.
right,
But again, like I said, the sandblasting is going to refer to the steel underneath
right, and then just
and then
textured
the coating
over.
on
Yep.
top. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking. Given that it's like $190.
Yeah. For sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. But it's a cool little field watch. If you're an affordable collector and maybe you're not trying to spring for a Hamilton khaki in the 500 to maybe down to 300 some odd dollar range for a used or store model or something, this might be your option. I mean, it's got all the Field Watch vibes. It's got a creamy lume. Uh, Kind of neat. A lot of these watches will have a steel case back. This one has a coated case back too, which is kind
Oh,
of
nice.
I've noticed that sometimes they'll say, well, you're not going to see the case back. I might as well just make it steel and
Yeah, because again, that would cut down on
skip some
cost too.
costs, right?
It's one less thing to have to coat.
But yeah, they even did the case back, which is a nice touch. And yeah, 100 meter screw down crown, solar movement,
Screw down crown?
screw down crown.
Really?
Yep.
On a
On the
Timex?
Timex at that price point, not
That's
too
kind
shabby.
of yeah. That's actually not bad. That's not common on a lot of different price points, but wow,
Yeah, you're gonna.
Timex.
It comes on a fabric strap, so nothing crazy there. But great little watch, great fun watch, beater all around her.
Yeah,
Grab it and go. Obviously, it's a solar quartz movement, so ultimate grab and go style watch, but a one that I very much enjoy.
I like that. I like that. Well, since you kind of led into to my pick,
Did
um,
I?
yeah, you did. I figured this would be on your list as well, but we constantly talk about this watch in the show. We have for many different episodes. I have several good buddies that own it. You've owned it many times. Certainly the khaki field mechanical. This one being the black PVD case.
Yeah,
It's a great watch. I mean, we've talked about this. 80-hour power reserve movement, phenomenal specs. Several different versions. This one
great
comes
size.
predominantly on NATO. Great size at 38, like we've talked about before. I love the contrast that you get with the all black case, mirrored against the creamy lume, markers in the hands, everything like that just looks so good. Um, I think it's a fantastic package, and for what, $500 or $600, I think is where this one comes in around. It's a great package. It's a very, very, very good watch.
And in contrast, the Timex is a 36 millimeter watch. So if you're looking for
36.
something
Okay.
a little more masculine, a little bigger, if 36 is not your jam, maybe the 38 millimeter will suffice.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah, and you can't go wrong. Hamilton khaki.
I mean, yeah, what's not to love?
That's right up there with like the SKX for me as automatic first watch recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. I said $500 or $600. It's 545 US.
Yep,
Not bad.
with an 80-hour movement in it now.
Amazing.
Not too shabby at all. And now I think that they offer a bracelet on that too now, no? Not the
I
black,
don't
but
I don't know if they have a bracelet for the black one, but they have a kind of an H-link style bracelet for the steel.
yeah, I did see that.
It's pretty cool.
My next pick, one that I've tempted a lot. I've never owned this one, but I've taken a long, hard look at it. There's two versions of it. It's the SBBN 035. It is the Seiko Tuna, blacked out Marine Master 300. But it's a tuna. It's not that. It's not a. It says Marine Master, but it's not the Marine Master case that you're thinking of. It's a
Yeah,
tuna
yeah.
case. It's a big boy. You can get
But
these
it's a sexy boy.
kanji day wheel. It's very black and white stealth. Really cool watch. There's
I mean,
also
I,
the
I mean, I don't know how stealthy it is, bro, with that loom. Like you could see that loom from space.
oh yeah,
Like,
yeah, for sure. But all around just chunky masculine diver. Now there's also the SBBN 047, which is I believe it's titanium underneath and it's got a shroud on it. So you're
yeah.
getting more of a plastic, lighter weight. And I think that one's 1,000 meter.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Anyways, but I believe they're both quartz movement. So
Yeah.
they're going to be a little lighter than if they were chunky automatic. But there's just something about the tuna case that I've always been drawn to, and I'm curious
Yeah.
as to how it would wear on my wrist because I'm pretty average sized on the wrist, and I tend to trend towards smaller watches. But I'm super curious about it. As I stated before, Seiko has a way of making very big cases wearable.
Yeah. I mean,
I like them
yeah.
a lot, and the 035 comes in as it's actually ion plated, so I guess that's how they keep it pretty cheap
Cost
for
effective.
a
Yeah.
Marine Master. But overall, I mean, a watch that I really like. I do. Maybe I'll pick one up one day, especially because they take a pretty good hit used. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this wouldn't be a watch I'd run out full pay full retail on, but
No.
it's certainly a watch that would be very cool to have in the collection, just because it is so unabashedly Seiko, and unabashedly Seiko diver.
Yep.
Big, fat, broad arrow hand, gigantic loom. Again, like I said, it's radioactive. You could see it from space. An amazing looking watch, hockey puck style, which for me is very funny because it's actually very similarly styled to my dive computer, which is, as they call in the industry, a puck style dive
Yep.
computer.
Yep.
Just a big round hockey puck on your wrist, which is this is exactly what that is, right? Just in a analog format, which is so cool. But it's a really really solid looking watch, and I've always wanted to have a tuna in my collection, and I've just never done it. I don't know why, but I just have never pulled the trigger.
Yeah, and if you're looking for something maybe a little more techy or futuristic, you always go Arnie, the newer Arnie's.
Yeah, yeah, and any digi, right?
Yep.
But no, I like this watch. I do think this one's gonna wear big though, bro. Like
I agree. I agree.
I think it's but sometimes you need that.
Yeah, but I also don't think it would look absurd because it's all black as far as looks go.
Correct.
You'll get that
It's
little
very
bit of slimming
slimming.
effect.
Very
Yeah.
slimming, yeah. Yeah, but this looks it every photo that I see it on, I'm like,
I
man, this looks
know.
really good.
Trust me, it's been tugging at me.
Let's do it, dude. Let's do it. It's a Merry Christmas to yourself, right?
Yeah, for real.
All right. Stepping up the game a little bit. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I gotta bring in one of my favorite brands, Doxa, and I gotta go with one of the carbons. I mentioned the white pearl kind of already, but one of the other ones that I really love in the carbon case for me is the aquamarine.
Oh, it looks so good.
There's something about that colorway that is just so good in the black carbon with that beautiful turquoisey blue dial. Not a Tiffany blue,
No, it's
but a
turquoise.
turquoise blue. And it's so good. It's too good, honestly. And again, with the carbon case, exceedingly lightweight. This would be a more of a nostalgia watch for me rather than like an actual diving watch that I would use in the field. But certainly a very cool watch to kind of be reminiscent of, I don't know, just different styles and things like that. And it's interesting. I would love, love, love to see this on the wrist and doing some diving.
Yeah, I saw these watches and the this color dial originally, and I thought it would be more like a almost like a Carolina blue.
Yeah,
Saw them in person, and I was like, "Whoa, this is way greener than I thought it was." It's not green at all, but it's greener than what appeared in renders. I don't know.
yeah,
The color is just not the same in a good way. I really like the shade that it turned out to be, and I think with the black case, you get a very, I guess it's like a Miami Marlins type of vibe. But
oh yeah,
yeah,
that's
but
right.
in a good way. Like it's a
Yeah,
great combination. And I had the pleasure of checking out the White Pearl Carbon, and that was actually one on my list that made it. And it's so good with the full loom dial, the contrast. It just looks
beautiful.
great, and
It's
it's obviously
beautiful.
super light, wears really nicely. Another one that I've been just super tempted by. Maybe,
Hmm.
but so many watches,
Yeah,
so little
it's
money.
so little time.
So little
So
money.
little time for sure.
I will round it out with one more watch that I have in my current collection. I have this in the U50 format. Zinn has been doing
Ooh,
this
yes.
for a hot second with the U1. They do it now with the U50. They've done a lot of black watches. Obviously, they have a somewhat of a military aesthetic, right? With the EZM mission timers and things like that. They make plenty of black watches. They have
For
watches
years.
with rainbow accents on them. The U1s all look really good because the black, white, red scheme looks really good. The
Yeah.
U50 that I have is the sort of blue fume looking dial, gradient style dial. So it's more of a black, white, blue look. That's
Yeah.
just something that I prefer. But yeah, black case. And let me tell you something cool about this watch. The first day I had it, I worked to work and I went to go grab a soda from the fridge, and that we only have them in the giant sleeves of 12 packs. So like I opened the 12 pack and there's another 12 pack stacked on top of it, and I guess it must have been open. And so it flings open and a can comes flying out. And obviously first inclination is to catch it, right? So I catch it, but in kind of an underhanded fashion, and it
Oh
hits the
no.
clasp, right? And I'm like, oh, here we go, right? So like I was saying, we're gonna find out how scratch resistant this is. So I take it off, I look, and I'm like, and I see some silver. I'm like, oh man, I was like, this thing already rubbed off. I was like, this isn't scratch resistant at all. A little later, I'm sitting there and I'm rubbing it, and I found out it was the can that came off and it rubbed off, and underneath was fine. It wasn't
Yeah.
beat up at all. There was not even a marking. And I was like, oh wow, this is actually is submarine steel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that I would say that's probably guaranteed to be a DLC coating.
Yeah, for sure. Or I know Zen does a lot. They do like their tegimenting underneath the
Yes,
the
they
hardening
do
of
that
the
also.
metals. That
Yep.
could also be something that they do prior to adding a topical coating as well.
Yeah, I
There's
could
so
see
many
that.
things that you can do, right? Um, and that's certainly a good one. I mean, they have been synonymous with black watches, PVD or DLC or otherwise for forever. I mean,
Yeah,
some
they
of
do
the
it
early
right.
Zins were, the Porsche design, like Flieger chronos and the Orfina Flieger
Yeah,
chronos that were
the
worn.
Orfina comes to mind.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, like
exactly what I just thought.
this is all Zin's handiwork, and they've been doing that for what 40, 50 years at this point, you know. So pretty cool. Pretty
Yeah,
cool to
very
see that.
cool. And obviously they come in a little more pricey. I guess if you're into that, but you're not looking for, if maybe you're an affordable collector, or you don't or maybe it's not a piece that you want to be necessarily like a keystone piece in your collection, you could always check out, like, there's a few like micros by some military guys like Sangin and stuff like that make
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
similar watches that are not, maybe not submarine steel and tegimented, but they'll scratch the itch if you're down for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff out there, and I would love to get my hands on a Sengen. They're just always sold out, like always.
Yep.
They do those little micro drops, and they're gone like in an instant. It's like the old
Halios. That's what it reminds me of.
Halios
Yep.
days. Yeah, I was gonna say Helsing, but no, Halios.
Halios.
Yeah, still can't still can't see those watches
Yeah.
ever.
Still no seaports.
Yeah, whatever happened to them?
They're still putting out stuff. It's just they've been trying to do the innovation thing. They've been putting out some. They put out like the Fairwind and stuff. I mean, it's a little
But
bit
I
like,
haven't seen them do any drops in a very long time.
I don't know. I mean, I've the only one I really was roped in by was the original Seaforth, and that was before the Oyster Perpetual came back big, and it was really
Yeah, with
before
that light blue.
the steel dress sport wave came back again. So they were a little bit ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why that watch caught fire, was because it was right in the beginning and people were just all over it. Obviously, really good size, price isn't bad, colors were really cool. You could get them with the different bezels. That was when the
Yeah.
12-hour bezel was really big on dive watches. So I feel like a perfect storm of things for them at that point. And since then, they've had some cool stuff. They have a watch that has the clasp where you push the button and you can quick adjust it on the
Okay, so
clasp. It's
like
the
a yeah.
logo,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Halios logo. You push it in and you can adjust it. So I've kept up in that regard, but nothing really has gripped me the way that the original did.
Gotcha.
And actually, they put out a puck, didn't they? I
Yeah, they had a one of their first ever models, I think, was a puck. I can't remember what the heck it was called at this point though.
think it was called the Halios puck.
Was it the Halios puck?
I think so.
Maybe. Yep, it's gotta be.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, the Halios puck. But this was a big boy. Like this was a
A
big,
chonky
big,
boy.
chunky boy. As the young kids say, a thick boy. Thick
Yep.
with two C's.
Two C's.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a cool watch for sure. But I just, for me, it's always been one of those things. I would like to own one. I can just never get the opportunity to do it
Yeah.
because so many people buy them out before they're even and like I don't even see the notifications on social media anymore. It's probably just all people that have email ties to the brand, and they get first drops on those
I
when they're already
want to
sold.
say they did that on purpose. I want to say they did that to avoid the scalping and secondary sellers.
Yeah,
I think they try to make it more of just like a loyal fan base type of thing.
yeah. But I mean, the issue is like you only have, according to their website, you have like three different watches. Like, I mean, I should say three different collections of watches.
Yeah.
Like, can I get one? You know, like, like they're all
What's his
they're
name?
all
Jason? I think it's Jason, right?
it's like they're all currently unavailable. you know,
Yeah.
and that's it's just a name I haven't heard in a very long time.
Good problems to have, I suppose, for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good things, good things. But last watch for me, I have to go a little bit high in the price point, and I'm gonna go.
Panerai Carbotech. I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
oh God, I before I say what I'm gonna say, like all kidding aside, Carbotech's super cool watch design, very flawed in its construction. So many people have had an issue with Carbotechs, and it's really sad. Like I've seen, because the Carbotech is, as I was talking about, it's basically like a carbon composite material. And the reason why it's got these striations is because of different layers of carbon that they stack on top of each other. Then they press it and they create a case out of it. I've seen images of people where the carbon layers have actually split in the case, like they've actually unadhered from each other, or lugs literally just cracking off during a routine strap change. Just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. So some of these carbon cases, I really advise against them if they're very, very intricately designed. Now, that said,
Oh, I know
going
where you're
to
going. I know where
yeah,
you're going. Go ahead.
going to a material we really haven't talked about, but it's certainly a black material. I'm gonna do ceramic, and for me, I gotta go big boy, hit it out of the park, and I'm gonna do an Omega Dark Side of the Moon.
Yep, that's where it was going.
This watch was originally launched in 2013, and I remember when we first got our shipment of these first ever Dark Side of the Moons, and they were gone within minutes when they
They're
arrived.
sick though.
It's such an amazing watch. Now it's a thick watch, certainly. It's a chronograph, automatic, and I imagine at some point here, probably in the near future, Omega would update this watch because it's kind of having a resurgence, from what I understand from all my friends that are still
Well,
in
it was a
the.
good seller, no? I know a
It
lot of
was a
people
it
that
was
have
a
them.
great seller for a few years, and then it just drastically kind of dropped off from, and it dropped off right around the time I was leaving the watch industry in terms of selling. But all of my friends that still remain contacts in the industry, they've said over the last year or two, there's been a crazy surge in people wanting ceramic watches, specifically from Omega. All the different versions of the size of the moons and all these different things, like they can't keep them in stock, which is crazy to me. Because this is not an inexpensive watch. It's
No,
$12,000 or
not at
so, I
all.
think, retail, if I remember correctly. Um, but it's insane, this watch, and one of the most beautiful master classes in the creation of an all black design, specifically because it's extremely legible. But one of the things that it was unique, I mean, I remember doing, listening to this during an Omega training. The rep was talking to us about it, and one of the unique things that was different about the Dark Side of the Moon from other watches in the industry that use ceramic is typically they're all singular finishes. So if you look at something like a Chanel J12, it's a completely high polished case. You look at something like an IWC Big Pilot, or Mojave Desert, or whatever the hell you
Yeah,
want to talk about. Like, it's all a matte finish.
right.
There's very few brands in the industry that can do multi-tone finishes in ceramic because it's so expensive and because it's so labor intensive. And he was telling me that they use like lasers and they use like diamond tooling and all these different things to actually do the machining for the ceramic to create the satin sides of the case, but also the high polished bevels that you still see on other watches. To me, that's impressive.
Yeah, of course.
And it's it's an amazing design to watch. It looks fantastic. It's super stealthy, and it's a watch that for me is honestly a grail piece. I want to have some type of ceramic Speedmaster in my collection at some point because I think it is a phenomenal material. I love the way that they look. The light play on a ceramic watch is unlike anything else you're going to get in metal. It has the same glossiness as like a lacquered finish on a dial, but you have this unique texturing and finishing on the sides of the case, and it's just really beautiful. And you just don't get it in anything else like that. And even since then, all the other iterations like the Apollo 8, the Alinghi, the blue side of the moon, Omega's been, masters in ceramics. And again, I know we've been talking about coatings, and it's not really a coating at all because they make their ceramic completely black from the inside out.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about black watches, it would be certainly remiss to not talk about the dark side of the moon. And I think this is one of those watches that on the low key made black watches, specifically sport watches, desirable again.
Great again.
I mean, this is all the way back in 2013, right?
And hey, if you only got a couple $100, maybe you get yourself a Mission to Mercury.
There you go.
Honorable mention.
Honorable mention.
Yeah.
Honorable.
The other great part about black watches is they look killer on pink straps. So
they do. They do look killer on pink straps.
Speaking of folks, it's no disrespect. I appreciate you still tagging me in the post. I'm not reposting anymore. They've had it. October's over. October's over. I'm respecting boundaries. Okay. It's not that I don't love you.
It's Movember.
It's not that I don't love you, but I gotta let other people do their thing for now. So just save them. Save the good ones. Save the good wristies. October will be back next year. So
save the wristies.
Save this something. No. But yeah, so black watches. I think they're coming back. I do. I feel like there's a resurgence going on, and I feel I'm here for it.
Yeah, I am too. And it's one of those things that for me, I think it always comes and goes. If you think back to like the 1980s, DLC watches, PVD watches were first coming out into the marketplace. And for a lot of people, they were so cool. Like I remember the original design launch of the Tag Heuer diver, the Night Diver.
Yeah.
That was featured in James Bond film of all places with Timothy Dalton. Like an amazing looking watch, even by today's standards, on the small side, but still an amazing looking watch. There's something so cool about that stealthiness, that for lack of a better term, very masculine design for the all black colorway. And I know that for some people it falls kind of out of favor and it comes back, but it's something that just I don't think will ever leave, because there's something so incredibly cool about those colors. And black watches are they're just A1.
Yeah, and I think it's just cycles. For a while it was steel watches were kind of ho hum. Then they made a big resurgence. Black watches, I think precious metals will be back at some point. I think they've kind of come back a little bit recently.
I think two-tone. Two-tone has really made more of the comeback than the precious metal.
Yeah, but I think we've seen a lot of colored golds recently. Yeah. I think that's been a new thing. I mean, obviously Omega's done a ton of it between the Sednas, the bronze golds, things like that. I mean, they've always done a fair amount of it, but I think you're seeing more of that around than you were maybe 5-6 years ago. So
yeah,
I think it's just market cycles, trends. Some people insist that these brands decide this way ahead of time and we're just the sheep. Maybe that's true. So
hey, you know what? I mean, there's probably something to that.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
That tells you, hey, just hold on. If you like it now, hold on to it. It'll be back in style, right? It's like the 70s.
I mean, it's funny. As a last side note, it was something that I heard. It was like a meme going around. Because right now, for women, the trend is kind of these bigger, bushier eyebrows, right?
Yeah, yes.
And apparently it started coming out like in different fashion weeks and stuff, that all the models were now tweezing their eyebrows to kind of like those like pencil thin ones from like the late 90s, 2000s.
And then you got to draw them in.
And you got to kind of like draw them in again. And all the women were like, no, we're revolting. We are not going back to that. We did not suffer decades of abuse and all this stuff to grow these bad boys back only to send
Only
them
to
back to
pluck
the
them
Stone
again.
Age.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, everything does come back in cycles. So there you go.
Yeah, that is true. And I know some people that they haven't come back. So,
Yeah, I mean that's why
word to
the
the
whole
wise.
that's how the whole microblading thing took off, where someone just like literally injects stuff in your face. I guess I don't know how it
Oh
goes.
God.
I'm not a chick.
Cosmetics are so
I'm not a chick, so I'm not
strange.
gonna worry about that. But yeah, that's a thing. So there you go.
If anybody needs, I've got more than enough brow to go around. So
Yeah, no joke, no joke. You and me both, buddy. You and me both.
uh, with that, watches and eyebrows. With that, we'll let this one see itself out. Schmitty, as always, a pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in.